And it is time for Building Rural Wealth. We have with us this morning Rachel and Kaleb from Milestone Financial, estate tax planning, protecting your legacy from major tax hits. So set this up for me, Kaleb.
Yeah, well, today, we want to discuss, what are estate taxes? Most people think they got some idea, but we really wanted to, explain what that is, who they might impact, and also ways to plan around them. Again, and we'll talk about, there's been some recent changes with some of the laws affecting some of this stuff, but there's always reasons and, needs to review and look at this stuff, but also just educate yourself on this stuff too. But, one important reminder, we are not estate attorneys. We're not giving, legal advice, but we do feel it's very important that you use these things to collaborate with your estate attorneys, with your financial advisors, with your tax people, because, these things all overlap. Like we'll talk about, taxes and your wishes and how this actually executes, and the people you want this stuff to flow through ultimately does have a big impact. So today we want to kind of have a general discussion about, what are some of those things, especially if you're a high net worth individual, a business owner, again, or just, hey, I've done some of this stuff, but there's been some recent changes. Do I need to review this stuff, and what do I need to be looking at?
And Rachel, you're a tax professional.
Correct.
So let's start at the base level. What are estate taxes?
That's a good question. So estate taxes are essentially the taxes that are due when someone passes away and their assets are transferred to that next generation. So right now, the federal estate tax has a high exemption, which is a good thing, but it still can impact large estates, especially, they may drop in the future. Those tax laws can always change. So what might be true now may not be true down the road. Again, another reason to kind of plan around those estate taxes. Also here in Iowa, we don't have an estate tax for the state of Iowa, right? And as of this year, the inheritance tax has also been fully phased out. So even if you own a family farm, you've got some investments or land you've accumulated over decades, that's something you may want to consider adding up for those federal estate taxes.
Okay.
It just depends on the value. But, you want to eliminate surprises of a tax bill.
Certainly.
Once you pass. That's, your family has to deal with.
And, those values can add up quickly, that's for sure, with some family farms, absolutely.
Yes.
Well, and that's kind of where you see it too in family farming. We live in that part of the country where you can touch 3 different states, you know, so that can happen. So knowing those state tax laws can be pretty advantageous too. Yeah, planning is huge. We talk about this all the time. You kind of need a plan, but no plan is perfect either, and that's what makes it hard. But that's why you want to work with professional people. Your attorney, your financial people, your tax people that know this stuff too, and know with the passage of the big beautiful bill that estate tax is going to $15 million per person or $30 million per couple, which is indexed for inflation. What planning mostly does, the big things that it does is it helps protect that liquidity from your heirs so that they're not forced to sell that land or that business at an inopportune time. Again, if there's taxes due on that, you might have to hypothetically sell off 10, 20 acres of land or whatever it may be to pay for the taxes. Or especially in family businesses too. Farming's a family business too, but there's other, good small businesses, in Montgomery County that, need this type of planning as well too. But estate planning isn't just about, taxes either. Again, that's kind of what gets the lead is the dollar for it. But again, the other part of estate planning and financial estate planning is directing your wishes, of how you want those things dispersed and keeping your family ultimately at peace. And again, like I mentioned, there is no one cookie cutter template. Every family, every situation is a little bit different, but by working with professionals doing that, you can help. And taxes are one big part of the legacy conversation, but, a lot of times they're not the most important one, either. So
let's talk about some of the keys, because you have several items here we need to touch on here. So keys to consider in this when you're strategizing.
Yes, there's a lot of components that go into your estate's value. So you really want to get a clear picture of the value of your land, business, investments, insurance policies. And like Kaleb mentioned, that exemption is high and it's going to stay that way. But we also want to take into consideration that over the years, that land particularly and some of your assets are going to appreciate in value. So sometimes you may be surprised once you start adding things up and people may not realize the value.
Yeah, looking at your whole
estate.
net worth.
Right.
Maybe.
Yes.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
your whole net worth statement where some people just look at one part or this part or whatever.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. So on that note, you've got the clear picture of the value. You can implement some gifting strategies if you need to reduce some of the value of that estate. It's a really great way to kind of plan over the years. You can gift up to $19,000 per person per year. So that's a good way to help kids and grandkids out, gradually over the years. The use of trusts can help remove assets from your estate. So a trust can help provide control over how and when those assets are distributed. So again, we're not estate attorneys, but you'd want to coordinate with them on trust strategies, but it is a good way to kind of have a trust hold your assets and protect and also have more control over when they're transferred.
Okay.
Charitable donations are always a good tax strategy if you are charitably inclined and you are have the funds to give back, support your church or your community foundation. It's a great way to kind of plan and reduce some of those taxes.
What about life insurance, Rachel?
So life insurance is a good way to provide your heirs after you pass with funds to pay those taxes. So, you have to have a proper ownership structure. Again, that's something you will work with your trusted advisors and team on. But properly structured, it can really help provide that cash needed to pay any taxes due.
Okay.
The business succession planning really actually hits home here in rural Iowa.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially with those multi-generational farms. And we also have a lot of multi-generational businesses, like Kaleb had mentioned, outside of the farms, that really having that succession plan can help maintain the family ownership. I mentioned, we don't want to risk having to sell off any part of a farm or a business just because we're transferring those assets.
One of the things that probably is just good in life and good in general and helps everything is good record keeping. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I know. It's so simple, Aaron, but it really, really can have a very big impact on how everything plays out. So you definitely, if something happened to you tomorrow, right, would your family know where to find everything? Mm-hmm. Hopefully
Good question.
So.
Hopefully they do.
Hopefully so.
Yeah.
And then it's also important to update, along the way because things change. So it really just helps your family and your executor during a stressful time if you have those good records in place.